Hello, and welcome to the Safety Leadership Conference workshop presentation. Why are we still talking about leadership and engagement in 2020? We encourage you to interact with today's speaker and each other in the Q&A chat to your right. Today's speaker is Julian Taylor, Head of Sales Enablement for She Software. Julian has worked within the health and safety sector for 20 years and is passionate about engaging and empowering broader teams within organizations to make safety happen. His full bio can be found by clicking on the speaker profile below. And with that, Julian, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and thank you everybody for attending today. It's great to see so many people on the session. So, quite a contentious title. Why are we still talking about leadership and engagement in 2020, or even as we approach 2021 now? And it's been a subject that a lot of people have talked about for a long time, but it's still challenging, isn't it? For EHS professionals, it's still a challenging subject, and it's still a challenge to make this happen within our organisations. I want to start by talking about a model that everybody or most people will be familiar with. They might call it different things. So some people may refer to it as Heinrichs Triangle. Some people may refer to it as the bird's triangle. But the principles are the same. Commonly, what you'll see is that this has numbers associated to it. So X number of unsafe acts or unsafe conditions is going to lead to a fatality. And again, I take the numbers out of this because I don't want to get caught up in the semantics around whether that number is accurate, whether that number is reality. More, I want to think about the really important principles that this model tells us, which is really simple. If we know about these things at the bottom, so if we know about the unsafe acts and the unsafe conditions, we know about the near misses, actually we can do something about them. So we can go and rectify them, we can put them right. And the key thing, and the reason why we're all EHS professionals, is we stop people getting hurt. So we prevent the accidents happening in the first place. So very simply, what we want to do is we want to talk about leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. So again, I think there's still a cultural shift that needs to happen, and again, globally, around actually the metrics that we look at as organizations. Now, this model was first thought up, probably in the early 1930s, so nearly 90 years ago. So 90 years on, what we see when we go and talk to a lot of organizations is they're still struggling to get their people to tell them about these things at the bottom, so actually we can start to be proactive in our safety management. So why is that? Why is that still such a challenge? I want to draw you a picture. I want to draw you a picture of a typical organization. And in that typical organization, we have the health and safety person. So they're illustrated by this yellow figure at the top of the screen. What we commonly see is that they have a small team that they work with. You might all sort of have a wry smile on your face when I say, I've never come across an organisation where the health and safety team has been oversized or too large. The safety team then commonly work within a department, maybe HR, maybe operations, and that department is often found within a head office. Once we start to look outside of the head office, what we see are maybe regions. So this is a global example where we've got Europe, we've got the USA, we've got APAC. Could be equally just be a North American organization with regions across North America. Once we get into the regions, we then get down to site level. So we might have a number of sites across each of our regional areas. Within the sites, we then break down into teams or departments. What we've not talked about yet are people. So once we start to get down to this level, we start to actually interact with people. So we'll have people who work within those departments. What we also see very commonly is people who work remotely. So people who have remote jobs where they have little or maybe sometimes no interaction with a physical site. So it could be engineers, implementation engineers, delivery drivers, community health people, lots of different jobs where people work remotely. Now, what we've done there is visualized on the screen quite a simple example of what an organization may look like. But already it starts to get quite complex. And if we start to think about the challenges we have then around health and safety, our safety team at the top here have got a challenging job to communicate effectively both down that tree, but also across it to the multiple sites and departments. One of the most important things, though, is that they actually help people to understand the value of safety, so that we start to get a flow of information back up the way as well. So actually, one of the key things about effective safety management is actually people telling us about things. Because if they do that, we can start to deal with it, we can start to understand the reality of what's happening within our organisation. Life's been made even more complex in 2020 with the advent of COVID, where lots of sites have either temporarily closed or maybe closed, opened up, closed down again. And actually it becomes even more challenging for us to be able to effectively communicate with, meet with, or talk to people around health and safety activities. One thing it has done is firmly put the focus back onto the health in EHS, though, which is probably a good thing. So it becomes really challenging when we've got this organisational complexity to be able to just do safety. And actually, if we're using old-fashioned systems, if we're using things like spreadsheets, it becomes even more challenging. Now, when we go back to our model, so our triangle, what we commonly see is actually this is the reality of that world. So because we haven't had the ability to build relationships with all of those people at all of the different levels, because they don't understand the true value of safety and the true value of reporting those things from the bottom of the triangle, actually because those things haven't hurt anybody or actually caused an ambulance to arrive at site, people don't report them. So that may be a combination of a lack of understanding and also poor systems. But what we find then are, instead of people working in a reactive manner, people are, we call it managing history. So they're managing the things that have already happened, the things that we can't prevent from happening. So our ideals as safety professionals has got to be to change that situation. Now, to further sort of think about this, actually we at She Software, after lots of visits to lots of different organisations in lots of different regions of the world, we identified the model that I'm going to talk through now. We call it the health and safety cycle. And the starting point is leadership. And let's put this very simply. If leadership isn't effective within an organisation around health and safety, actually that has a direct correlation to your future success. Now, what I'd like you to do, first of all, is think about an organisation where you've worked, where there's been a positive leadership style. There's been a good leadership style where it encourages people to talk, to report things, and to come up with ideas. The knock-on effect of that is that we get an uplift in engagement. People feel confident in that leadership style, so they tell us about things. The knock-on effect of that is that we start to create a flow of information. We create a flow of data. And that's really incredibly valuable to us as an organisation, because we can take that data and we can start to interrogate it. And if we've got the right systems, we can visualize it. We can start to see some really important trends, maybe trends that we've not identified before, and we can make great decisions. So we can make great strategic decisions around safety that mean we drive this thing called continuous improvement. And again, when we think about our aims as safety professionals, that is one of the key things that we're looking to do. And also, really importantly, it underpins just about every major standard. So if you look at any ISO standard, continuous improvement is one of the key goals out of that standard. Now I want you to think about things the other way around. So actually think about or reflect on an organisation where you've worked, where the leadership style hasn't been so good. Maybe it's been autocratic, maybe it's been bullying, or maybe it's just focused on the wrong things. So actually, if you think about that leadership style where maybe there's a real focus by senior leadership on sales numbers, maybe it could be on production numbers, it could be on things like patient numbers in healthcare, but leadership obsess on that thing, and that's what they talk about all the time. But a combination of the style of leadership or their focus actually then has a direct negative correlation on engagement, because the people who work for us suddenly start to think before they tell us about things. They worry about potentially the reaction of leadership if they report something that's negative or being perceived as negative. They worry about reporting if they think it's going to have an effect on those important numbers that leadership talks about. So if they think that a safety concern is going to have an effect on production numbers, maybe they don't report it because they worry about the reaction. So again, the direct knock-on effect of that is all of a sudden this information flow slows down. So it stifles the flow of information. And rather than making great informed decisions, actually maybe we're kind of just guessing. Maybe we're putting our finger into the air and just guessing. And whilst we might still drive some improvement, actually it's far harder for us to be confident that we're going to drive continuous improvement. So that cycle is a really important one to consider, because again, it's not as simple as saying if leadership's not there, we're going to struggle. We could have good leadership, we could have good engagement, but actually if we're using old-fashioned systems, if there's been a lack of investment in systems, actually we might create a flow of data that we're unable to handle. We can't visualize it simply and easily. We can't share it easily with management to encourage more conversations. So actually we still struggle to drive that continuous improvement. We might have great leadership, but actually if we're using old-fashioned systems, if we're asking people to use paper forms to report things, we still may struggle to drive good engagement. So it's thinking about each one of those components and making sure that we address them in the right way to actually drive the sort of full cycle and drive that full sort of cycle towards improvement. Now, another part of this is thinking about the way that we talk about things. So if we're talking about leadership and we're talking about engagement, one of the sort of buzzwords of the last few years has been talking about safety culture. So I want to create a safety culture. And a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with a safety professional who said, I wish everybody would stop talking about safety culture. And my first reaction was, what on earth are you talking about? But actually, the arguments they made absolutely made sense. And what they talked about was the fact that actually we might be working very diligently as that small health and safety team to try and create this culture of safety. But actually, if the business culture has different objectives or is at odds with safety culture, the business culture will always win out. So actually, as safety professionals, it's far better and far more effective for us to try to achieve one positive culture. So again, if we think back to that leadership model, a positive culture around all aspects of our business, so a positive culture about ideas and about reporting across all elements and all different departments, actually supports good safety, because people will be confident to talk about safety, because they know that whatever it is that they bring forward is taken in the right manner. So one culture, it should be an aim, should be an ambition that we aim for. So to summarize so far, we need to think about leadership. So critically within an organization, health and safety teams need to be influencers. So we need to start to think about, how do we influence our leadership? How can technology help to support leadership? So it may be that we provide information to them on a more regular basis. So I talked earlier about changing our reporting culture. So our reporting culture commonly is we provide a report once a month. So if you think about those other important metrics that I've talked about, how often do your leadership look at that? And I can guarantee it's not once a month. So if we look at safety data once a month, how often are we going to talk about safety? So actually, through a great system, we can provide data and we can provide metrics on a daily basis. But it means that people talk about safety more often, and it just becomes a part of the day job. We can also challenge leadership to do things. So we can challenge them to be going out and doing safety tours. We can challenge them to be doing coaching. And again, if we can make it easy and simple, people are more likely to do it. We need to drive culture. We need to drive this one culture. So again, a knock-on effect of that good leadership style is that people feel comfortable in reporting things. People feel comfortable to tell us about things, to talk about safety, and they know that it will be received in the right way. We then have this acronym KISS, which I find really interesting. A good US acronym, which came out of NASA in the 1960s. But so many people get this wrong. So if I ask you now, what does KISS stand for? I can guarantee a lot of people will be saying, keep it simple, stupid. And actually, that's wrong. It's also rather patronizing, but it's wrong. So it actually stands for keeping it stupidly simple. And that makes far more sense, doesn't it? If we can look at our safety processes and we can keep them stupidly simple, people are just more likely to do it. So again, with that culture and that engagement piece, by keeping it stupidly simple, people start to create this flow of data because they start to tell us about the unsafe acts and the unsafe conditions. They tell us about the near misses, creates that flow of data that we can then visualize, and then we can use that to further educate people. We can show leadership that we're improving things, but also we can feed back to the people that have reported it to show what they do, what they've reported is making a difference. And then it's that ongoing reinforcement. So again, through showing people our performance, but actually, if we understand which teams are reporting things, we also know which teams aren't reporting things, we can go and coach and we can go and educate. And again, through the metrics that we create, we can start to see what are the things, what are the subjects we should be going and talking about. So do we have a particular problem with injuries around hands, for example? Well, let's go and talk about maybe specifics around how we can protect people. So whether it's the right PPE or whether it's about the use of equipment, actually we can start to go and coach and educate people to proactively prevent things from happening. To finish off with today, what I'd like to do is just very briefly show a couple of areas of our software system, which is called Assure, and sort of highlight how technology can support some of these points that we've talked about today. So if you will bear with me for 1 minute, I'm just going to flick across to another screen. What we can see here is, first of all, we can see a mobile app. And again, one of the key things about cultural change is investment in good systems and making it really easy for anybody to be able to talk to us about safety. We talk about giving people a safety voice, and this is one way of doing it. So actually within the system, you can create a range of forms. They're tailored to your organization, even down to the icons that are used on the forms. But the idea is that we can change that culture and make it really easy for people to be able to tell us about things. And again, one of the biggest killers of a safety culture is we still do things on paper forms. I've got an example on my desk of a near miss reporting form. Now, if you ask people to go and report things these days, their expectation is I can pull my phone out of my pocket and I can do it quickly and easily on a mobile app. So this is what you can do here. So I'm working on a desktop today, but I've sort of visualized it as it would look on a tablet. If I click on report a hazard, allow me to start the form. We can align this to your organizational structure. so they can say where they're working from. It can have a GPS locator in it, but very simply, it's an easy form to complete. So I don't have to click and type lots of things. I go to find location, it can find where I am, so it's picked me out straight away, so you can see where I'm based tonight. As I go on down, where possible, we use pick lists, because that does two things. It means that it makes it really easy for people to complete the form, and also it's very easy then to report against in the dashboard. And again, where possible, things like radio buttons, which makes completing of this form really simple. So I can put a description in here, and I can put slip hazard. I'll keep it very simple tonight for that. Okay. And then when I go across to the left-hand side, if I'm on a mobile device, I can go to my camera roll and I can add a picture. So let's just drop that one in. So that's just a picture that I've dropped in very simply. But if I'm on a phone, on a tablet, I can go to the camera roll or the camera and take a picture. So we get really good supporting information right at the point of reporting, and then submit. And it's really simple and it's really easy. Let me see what I've not done. Okay, I need to put my name in there, so let's just drop that in. So again, if I don't do things properly, it's going to tell me. Okay, so really simple and really easy. So that's that engagement piece where we're talking about being able to drive that flow of information. We give people a safety voice, we drive a flow of information. So my form's been submitted, it will go into the main software system, and it's going to notify people and prompt the next steps. So when we think about that safety triangle right at the start, we know about the unsafe act, we know about the hazard, then prompts the resolution of the hazard, and it prevents the incident from happening. So that's one very simple example. But most critically, what effective systems give you and what technology gives you is visibility. And visibility is really powerful in a number of ways. First of all, it allows you to make strategic decisions. So as a safety professional or an EHS professional, I can look at different metrics and I can say, where do we need to focus our efforts? Where have we maybe got any problems? And do I have that comfort that we're compliant as an organisation? Now, if we keep walking along our theme of hazards, what you can see here is that as people report them using the mobile device, actually it comes straight into the dashboard and I've got visibility immediately. What we can do is we can start to look specifically at certain types of hazards. So I can look at my electrical hazards, for example. I can right click, I can go into here and I can drill into that information. So where have those hazards occurred? So I can click onto the organisational name. It's now showing me the different locations. If I want to see then who's reported it, I can click onto that and I can see who's reported those hazards. So I can start to see some trends. I can start to see who's engaged in hazard reporting and who isn't. But also I can start to look at trends like what day of the week have they happened? Has there been a particular time in the shift that they've occurred? So we can start to see if there's some particular elements that we can address that are going to stop the hazards occurring or happening in the first place. Within the system, any data that's flowing in, we can start to visualize. And we can visualize it in some really nice and interesting ways. So we've talked about our safety triangle. So let's visualize our safety triangle within our dashboards. So here we can start to actually see as an organization how are we performing in terms of our relationship of hazards or leading indicators against our lagging indicators. We can also start to, when we're doing things like investigations, we can start to be quite imaginative in terms of the way that we visualize things like root cause. So you can see here we've done some things like word clouds, which have brought out the most commonly identified root causes across a range of investigations that we've done. But the thing to think about here is actually as an organization is then how do we use that data? So we can present this data to more people on a more regular basis. So we can show leadership that actually continuous improvement is driving better performance and efficiencies. We can show leadership some simple visualizations of data that mean they can have more conversations around safety on a more regular basis. And also we can share the dashboards with the broader organisation, so team leaders and supervisors, but also third-party contractors. So we can start to promote the fact that safety is really important, and these are the key things that we should be looking at. Now, at that point, I'm going to hand back to Nicole. Thank you for your time today. Really interested to hear any questions that you may have around leadership and around engagement.
Thank you, Julian, for that presentation. As Julian mentioned, we encourage you to submit your questions in the chat box on the right side of the screen, and thank you for joining us.